Switch has been home to some solid exclusives over the years, but if there is one that should be commended for its visual prowess, it has to be Astral Chain. It takes place in a futuristic space colony, with the player taking on the role of one of two characters. They can both be fully customized to your liking, with the one you fail to choose becoming your support throughout the game. Now the core gameplay is all about combat and puzzle solving. You have several weapons at your disposal, such as a laser pistol you start the game with, a light swift baton and a slow heavy blade. But the most useful tool in combat is something known as your Legion. It's a sort of companion that fights alongside you. It has its own HP, it can be restored with items, but when it reaches 0, the Legion disappears and you must wait for it to regain all of its health. Now graphically, Astral Chain is stunning on the Switch. The vibrant and dense world Platinum Games created looks beautiful in motion and is a real testament to the power of the console, especially when it's put into the hands of the right developers. From the characters to the enemies and each and every diverse environment you'll be visiting, the entire adventure just screams quality. Sadly, it's all presented in 30 frames per second, which may annoy some fans who are used to the fast-paced nature of these games, but it's nothing that completely ruins the adventure. If you haven't got around to playing it, Astral Chain will not disappoint. As we all know, Crysis has become a sort of meme when it comes to testing the power of a machine. When it was first announced for the Switch, I literally thought it was a joke, and quite understandably set my expectations to the minimum. Well, I was wrong. Not only does Crysis hold up on the Switch, it also manages to look phenomenal considering the power under the hood. Now for those that don't know, Crysis is an FPS that centers around the use of a special suit known as the Nanosuit. It gives the player an incredible amount of options and opens up a ton of gameplay opportunities thanks to the several abilities it offers. From maximum strength and armor for those who like to go in guns a-blazing, or maximum speed and a cloak for the more stealthy approach. It's a great system. Now visually, each of the games have been fully remastered, and while you're going to see a better amount of quality on different platforms, what Saber Interactive managed to pull off is nothing short of a miracle. Even though the game is presented at 30 FPS, each engagement feels fast, and unlike most Switch ports such as Doom and The Witcher 3, unfortunately it's not all sunshine and rainbows though, as the frame rate can become quite erratic during some of the more intense moments of the game. But this is something which can hopefully be improved with a few patches. Overall, the Crysis trilogy is a great package on the Switch. If you've never got around to playing it the first time, the Switch version is a great option. Although Octopath Traveler might not technically stack up to the other games on this list, it once again proves that strong design can outweigh all of the polygons in the world, and that a simple style of presentation can be just as impressive when executed right. For those who haven't played it, Octopath is an RPG very much in the vein of the old SNES titles many of us grew up with. It offers up an interesting take on the genre, and sees you being able to choose from 8 different characters to progress with at the start. Admittedly, the narrative is rather weak, but when it comes to gameplay, the amount of customization and more importantly battles make up for it. Octopath presents itself in a completely unique fashion when it comes to visuals. What's immediately clear to anyone who sees the game in motion, or even just in screenshots, is the way the artists realize this world. It features high definition visuals while still utilizing 16-bit sprites. It's a nostalgia trip and visual powerhouse all wrapped into one. And as with any RPG, you'll be coming across a varied amount of locations that all help flesh out the world and bring life to the events that transpire. But it's mainly in battle where the visuals start to shine. Each move you perform is accompanied by dazzling effects that light up the field in style. May they be offensive or simply by healing a party member, they manage to add a real weight to each of your actions. Overall, Octopath Traveler is the perfect blend of old and new. If you're a fan of the genre or are simply looking to get into something new, Octopath is a solid choice. Ultra Age shares much in common with the likes of Devil May Cry and God of War, mainly by offering up spectacular hack and slash gameplay, coupled with some truly impressive visuals. Now the setting takes on a more futuristic sci-fi tone when compared to the games that have clearly inspired it, and sees you playing the role of a young man named Age. Joined by his trusty robot Helvis, they work their way through the remains of a shattered world and try to escape an agency that was once thought to be on their side. Now the narrative is easily the weakest part of the overall package, is it just doesn't really go anywhere, but Ultra Age more than makes up for this shortcoming with its gameplay. It is fast and responsive, and will immediately feel familiar to those with any sort of history with the genre. You've got several weapons at your disposal which all offer unique abilities, from the katana to the claymore, and the more devastating like the lightning sword. Each of them have their own role to play depending on the situation at hand, but juggling between the lot is the order of the day, and results in some really flashy and stylish combos. Of course, Ultra Age also impresses when it comes to visuals. Each of the main character models and enemies all possess a nice amount of detail as well as personality. Matching this are the environments themselves, which range from dense jungles to scorching deserts and the cold walls of the various facilities dotted about the environment. Unfortunately, there are a few bouts of slowdown and texture issues that many will experience throughout play, but in my opinion, it's nothing that completely ruins the overall game. If you're a fan of hack and slashes, Ultra Age is well worth checking out. If there is one game that has been absent for way too long, it would have to be F-Zero. Nintendo's take on futuristic racing has always been one of my favourite series, and as the previous one on the GameCube was handed over to Sega to produce, it seems Nintendo have all but given up on the franchise. Of course, that doesn't stop other developers stepping in and filling the void, and thankfully Shinen were more than up to the task. Now it's essentially a reworking of the Wii U title Fast Racing Neo, and all centres around the concept of boosting. What makes it interesting is that the player has the ability to switch between two different states, which are represented by a colour. If the colour matches the boost pad on the track, you are sent bursting forward at breakneck speeds. This simple mechanic makes playing fast RMX not only engaging, but thoroughly rewarding as well. As with most racing games, you can expect to find a ton of machines as well as tracks to race on. Each of them are unique and add plenty of character to the game. You'll find yourself racing through sharp and shiny chrome-filled cities, ice-covered landscapes, jungles, deserts, and even outer space. A slew of environmental effects also come along with each track, such as storms and asteroid strikes that make navigating each of them all the more challenging. But the most impressive aspect of Fast RMX has to be its presentation. Not only is it running at 1080p, but also at 60 frames per second, which is practically essential for a game of this type. And whilst the resolution does get cut to 720 during handheld play, it still manages to maintain that solid 60 frame count, which makes playing it no matter where you are an absolute joy. If you've been itching for F-Zero, Fast RMX has got you covered. Just like Crysis, seeing Doom Eternal up and running on the Switch is a miracle in itself. Of course, various corners have been cut, and this will never be the best way to enjoy the game, but the fact that it's even up and running is something that needs commending. First off, it's blurrier. The resolution is usually running at about 720, but can at times dip down to 540 when the action heats up. The textures themselves are all presented at a much lower resolution as well, and perhaps most importantly, it runs at 30 FPS rather than buttersmooth 60, but the general level of detail remains intact, especially when it comes to the enemies and the environments you'll be playing through. When compared to the original Doom reboot, the diversity on offer is a welcome change of pace. The levels of the original were largely quite similar and never strayed away from the established design. Eternal takes this and turns it on its head by offering up a much more varied adventure that sees you exploring a much more diverse hellscape. One feature of Eternal is a clever visual feedback during gameplay that ID calls destructible demons. As you fire away at whatever unlucky demon is in front of you, pieces of their flesh fall off, eventually rendering them as walking skeletons, and by this time you're ready for a glory kill. This attention to detail is complemented by an immensely improved engine and new art style that feel right at home in the chaotic universe. Fans of the predecessor will quickly notice a more colourful and more comic book-esque aesthetic, with most enemies receiving a visual update, though sometimes at the cost of appearing less imposing and frightening than before. As I mentioned, this is not the best way to experience the game by any means, but if it's your only option, Doom Eternal on the Switch holds up well and is definitely worth adding to your collection. When it comes to platformers, the Switch is home to a wide number of incredible adventures, and while Yoshi's Crafted World might not be one of the hardest, it's definitely one that possesses the most charm. Coming off the back of Woolly World for the Wii U, which all centered around the use of wool, you guessed it, this time around it's all about crafting, and specifically the several types of materials usually associated with it. From cardboard to ribbons and string, this game is bursting with imagination. Now, like most games of this type, it's largely split up into a series of levels that see the player visiting a diverse set of locales and taking advantage of several abilities in order to progress. What makes Crafted World special is the sheer amount of interaction that's to be had. Each of the environments literally unfold before your eyes as you tug and push several objects that might open up new paths or completely alter the level entirely. Now, Crafted World makes use of Unreal Engine 4, allowing for some pretty neat visual effects not typically seen in Nintendo games. Unfortunately, it does come along with a significantly lower resolution than you'd usually expect in a side-scroller. The heavy use of depth of field might turn some players off as well. Thankfully though, it does run at 60 frames per second, which will help draw the player into each of the beautiful and colourful levels on offer, and with over 40 to make your way through, it's bound to keep you busy for quite a while. I'm not gonna lie, it is incredibly easy, but is still worth picking up. The sandbox was the forefront of the 3D revolution. With the ability to move in all directions, it's no wonder that developers and players alike wanted to run wild in these worlds, exploring at their own pace as much as completing objectives. Super Mario Odyssey further pushes this notion forward with one simple mechanic: your new friend Cappy. He's essentially a hat who you can throw at enemies, and allows some of them to be possessed or captured and to take on their abilities. Frogs can jump incredibly high, bullet bills can rocket through blocks and through the sky. There are absolutely dozens of options, all of which are connected to your ability to progress through the level. It's the first time a Mario game decided to do away with power-ups, opting to let you take the power of another creature to use it to your advantage. Visually, this game is incredible. It's another example of how creativity and imagination will always trump realism and graphical resolution. The graphics are bright, lively, charming, and captivating. It captures the awe of a fantasy world extremely well. There are some levels that are a little barren, such as the Desert Kingdom for example. Aside from that though, the game is beautiful in its art design and direction. From the cascade world of waterfalls to the beautiful beachside kingdom, the game delivers visually. Mario has even gone to the city in this title, throwing in the level based on New York City. This time around, the developers really outdid themselves in making every level not only feel like an adventure, but also look like one. And to top it all off, it's all delivered at a blistering 60 frames per second. Mario Odyssey is without a doubt one of the best games available on the Switch. Back in the mid-2000s, Metroid Dread was originally planned for the Nintendo DS and would act as a direct sequel to one of the greatest games in the series, Fusion on the Game Boy Advance. Unfortunately, it was never meant to be and quietly got cancelled due to the lack of power the DS offered and not being able to fulfill Nintendo's original ideas. Thankfully, not so long ago, it was announced for the Switch, and I can safely say that the near 2-decade wait was well worth it. It plays very much like the Metroidvanias of old and brings along a few new tricks that help it stand out, one being the enemies known as Emmy, who are practically indestructible and take on a sort of nemesis role throughout the adventure. They will hunt you down throughout the game, which adds a serious amount of tension to the gameplay as you're never quite sure where they're going to pop up. Now, one of the most impressive aspects of the game is easily its visuals. Samus herself animates fluidly, as do each of the enemies, especially the several bosses you'll be encountering, which soon go on to become the real star of the show. But it's not just the characters, the world itself feels alive. There's a whole range of locations you'll be visiting, which all have their own distinct personality and story to tell, from the dark and dank depths of caves to the brilliant sci-fi inspired corridors that gleam with light. It all looks fantastic. For those with a keen eye, subtle details play out in the background, and if you pay enough attention, you may even spot creatures going about their business as usual, or even an enemy that you might fight at some point in the future. It marks the return of one of Nintendo's most enjoyable franchises. I just hope Metroid Prime 4 can impress as much as this one has. With Breath of the Wild, Nintendo set out to create a Zelda experience unlike any other, and the end product is undeniably just that. In most other games in the franchise, the story is what influences them the most, but in Breath of the Wild I found that this is not the case, seeing as how it wasn't what propelled me to continue playing. It was the freedom and exploration factor of this game's massive landscape that made me connect with it the most. The open world of Hyrule is enormous in this installment, and the amount of freedom the player gets when thrown into the world is overwhelming. There is no set order that Link has to fulfill certain objectives. In fact, most of them don't have to be completed at all. This will no doubt intrigue the player to explore the world even further, as they don't have any clues as to what lies beyond a tall mountain or a wide lake. Now, the visuals in Breath of the Wild are simply beautiful. Nintendo wisely chose an anime-inspired art style which can present detail while still keeping the system requirements low. Each of the individual blades of grass can be seen swaying with the wind, and when Link, his horse, or even NPCs traverse the green plains, the grass gets split up in the process. The world offers breathtaking views from many high vantage points, and when Link stands still, leaves can be seen falling subtly around the screen. Complementing this is the lighting. Each area, weapon, and character model shines vividly and brightly, making the colours of this adventure stand out even more. Well, that does it for today's video. Keep an eye out for part 2 as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to hit subscribe and tickle that bell. You can follow me on all of the socials to stay up to date on future videos. You can also join our growing community on Discord and meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Nano, Steve, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Marcos, and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining our Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon to gain access to exclusive videos and giveaways for as little as $1 per month, you'll find the links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.